It's hosted by director, producer, and newly minted ASU sustainability professor, Peter Bick.
Yay.
So the Carbon Nation conversation, yes?
Cool.
These Carbon Nation conversations they're climate change solution conversations that don't even care if you believe in climate change, right, Peter?
That's true.
So Peter is fresh. I don't know if you saw Bill Maher, Real Time with Bill Maher on Friday, but Peter was the interviewee on Bill Maher on Friday. We were delighted to see him. He was just appointed as a professor of practice with a joint appointment with the Cronkite School. You'll be hearing a lot more from Peter in the coming years. He has over 20 years' experience as a director and editor, most notably with Carbon Nation, climate change solutions film. He also had some involvement with West Wing and Lord of the Rings.
Well, the behind the scenes.
Behind the
DVD.
scenes.
Yeah.
He's met and collaborated with the leading minds from the world of climate, clean energy, military applications, and land use. His contacts span the globe, keeping him up to date on the fast-moving frontier of the clean energy revolution. He's currently in pre-production for Carbon Nation 2.0, an ongoing series of short films promoting a low-carbon economy. And with that, I turn the podium over to Peter Bick and his first ever Carbon Nation conversation. Welcome.
Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, thank you. I wish this was on the round so we could be spinning, but I'll sort of do this. It's a real pleasure to be here, and Lauren does so much work on these events, and all I know is it's really hard to fill a room. There's always usually a lot of empty seats, and every time I've worked with Lauren, she fills the room perfectly, so I'm looking forward to more collaboration. It's an honor to be here at ASU. This will be the first of what we hope to be many Carbon Nation conversations, and the first person to say yes was the first person I asked, which is
That's a good record.
Exactly, is TJ DiCaprio. And we'll give you just a quick rundown, and then we're going to get into the conversation. She works for Microsoft. She's a senior director of environmental sustainability, and that's from 2009 to now. And she's just won some really neat awards. The 2013 U.S. EPA Individual Leadership Award, we'll find out why. And this other award that I find very cool, the 2012 U.S. EPA Green Power Partner Award for leading Microsoft to become the U.S.'s third largest purchaser of renewable energy. So we're sitting here with someone who cares about moving us to a low-carbon economy, and she's well-positioned inside a company. She's not outside holding a placard, running around bitching and moaning. She's inside and working it, and she's working it in a beautiful way. And that's why when TJ and I first spoke on the phone, it was January or February. We met from a guy from the EPA, a guy named Blaine, and our conversation immediately went on a lot of different levels, and one of the cool levels was just sort of like what your life is and who you are. So you were telling me last night at dinner about that you're a sailor, and that your job on these ships is you look for the wind. And just talk about that.
Oh,
That's
Peter, well, thank
fascinating.
you. Yeah, I'm a wind watcher, and for racing sailboats, someone needs to know where the energy source is, the power is, and so I either go up or out and keep an eye on where the wind is, and then I work together with the captain, and that's where we direct the boat. And so what's exciting about it is, and what I apply to the work that I do, is there's always the need to be listening, to be watching, to be aware of external influences, because those all impact how we get to our goal. And so we can have a goal, it might adjust. We need to be flexible with the input that we get in order to get to that point B, or to get to our goal and be successful. So that's the application of what I have done with my personal love of sailing.
She's a sailor, she's a pilot. And TJ, you worked at Microsoft a while ago, and then you left, and then you came back. So tell us briefly what you did at Microsoft and when, and the sort of interaction you had with your customers and sort of that world.
Yeah.
And then you left, and you did some cool stuff, and then you decided to come back. So just give me that quick rundown.
Well, my first life at Microsoft and my career was primarily in sales and marketing. Actually, I started in tech support and then moved to sales and marketing. And there I learned quite a bit about listening to the customer, understanding needs, responding to that, and as well focusing there on what is the business value in talking to customers, the business customers. And that was a key element that I was able to internalize and learn. I ended up taking a break. I needed to go off even just for some personal reasons. You know, careers can take many paths, and following a personal life. So I took a break and I went over to Florence, Italy and lived for a few years, studied art and did quite a bit of traveling and really enjoyed that experience.
Now, how long had you been working for Microsoft before you needed or took that break?
I was just about at the 9-year mark.
Okay.
Yeah. And I did some consulting during the time that I was in Florence and really immersed myself in the culture, the food, the wine. It was just an amazing experience. And then I realized it was time to come back. And I came back to work at Microsoft at that time and realized that I wanted to get into a part of Microsoft that really made a difference. And that sung with my heart. I have an educational background in environmental studies from the University of California. And I wanted to apply that. I'd kept very close contact and relationships with my professors, my teachers, my colleagues from school, and that was a big influence in my life. So when I came back, I really wanted to be able to use that and come into environmental work.
So you in college, it was at UCSB, right?
Right.
You studied environmental science?
Yeah,
Environmental
studies.
Environmental studies.
Yeah.
Then you had a career that had virtually nothing to do with that. You get your head cleared out in Italy with the wine and the food and the cheese.
Yeah.
And,
Italy does that.
And you come back and you realize, I got to do something more to my core, more to something I care about. And does Rob Bernard show up in this moment?
Yes, Rob Bernard currently is our Chief Environmental Strategist at Microsoft, and so, poor Rob, I came back and approached Rob and told him about my passion for the environment, the impact I felt that I could make, and so he gave me a chance, you know.
But you created a job that didn't exist.
To a certain degree, that is very true.
And then he didn't know how much you were going to create. So let's get right into, now I call things a carbon tax. We're calling it a carbon fee, but it's virtually the same thing, but there's reasons, tax and fee, and there's storytelling elements in that. So why don't you tell me, what was the light bulb moment for you of thinking we should have a fee for the carbon used at Microsoft?
It all gets down to accountability, and that's something we discussed a little bit earlier. There was a path to that, and this is part of how Microsoft started. It's a company that has been committed to environmental sustainability and started tracking carbon emissions back in 2007 and had a first goal to reduce carbon emissions 30% by 2012 based on 2007 levels. And so meeting that goal was a first try. It was a first goal for the company. And so and I inherited that goal when I actually came on in role. And so we met that goal. Part of that was purchasing renewable energy, and that's part of the reason behind that move. And we're trending in the right direction. We can't give out specific details, but Microsoft is trending in the right direction for purchasing renewable energy.
They were number 3 and they're trending in the right direction. Stay tuned.
Step by step. And so what we realized is that, especially in the technology industry, Microsoft itself with its own operations has a business shift away from software products into the cloud business in services. And therefore, as a result of that, Microsoft is investing in data centers globally. So data centers consume quite a bit of energy. So the epiphany was when I realized not only are our internal operations causing an increase in emission, I could no longer say that we will have an absolute reduction in emissions because they were growing because of the data centers. But also our customers, because of the use of technology, there's the proliferation of devices, which also require consumption of energy. And this impact was so significant that we realized there really is no option but to go carbon neutral. And so that's the overarching policy that we initiated for Microsoft. And then, therefore,
so just to jump in, so you're saying to yourselves, we're going to be using a lot more carbon, but let's get the offsets. Let's make sure that we're becoming carbon neutral, even though we're going to be using so much more, because there's no way we're going to not use any more carbon. There's no way we're going to reduce it to any significant level now. It's just going to grow.
No matter how much we reduce, and that's through efficiency. So the strategy for carbon neutrality is really to be lean primarily, which is to drive efficiencies. How can we be more efficient with the use of our data centers, with the use of our buildings, with the use of our software development labs? And after driving the efficiency, how can we then green our energy source as much as possible? How can we buy more renewable energy? How can we invest in innovation? How can we invest in innovation in developing countries to help them evolve in lower carbon economies? And so those were the two key areas that we focused on for carbon neutrality. There is going to be a certain amount that we can't always reduce or green because of geographical locations, et cetera, as an example.
And then travel and...
Yeah, and then travel, there's some things. So that's where we are able to then invest in carbon offsets, which help developing countries innovate.
So give us one example of that piece right there, the developing country innovating carbon offset. You guys are giving money to whom, and they're doing what with it?
Well, for example, we've got some investments. We have investments in wind energy in China and India where our operations are. We felt it was very important to invest in renewable energy where our data centers are, and then as well into farming so that we can have actually multi-cycle investments where we support farmers that then use that biogas and they fuel the foundation for promoting additional farming and food that then builds culture and community around that and provides people jobs.
So you have a farm that's collecting its off-gas,
Yes.
using that to spin a turbine,
Yes.
and so they're not off-gassing. So you're preventing methane from hitting the atmosphere that was hitting the atmosphere, and then that community's benefiting because now they're producing electricity from what was a waste product.
And so they can send renewable energy to the grid and use it themselves and start to build a community with jobs and food.
Got it.
So it's got
Okay,
multi-levels.
So we got the carbon neutral piece. So when did the fee come in, the carbon tax? Tax day.
Tax
Had
day.
to say it.
Tax day.
She's not going to say the word tax, ladies and gentlemen. She's going to say fee.
I'm going to say fee.
Yes.
It's very important. Well, it was the accountability.
Okay.
It was really getting the engagement of the people, the business division. So what we have done is to create this fee to pull people together and to engage, to tap their creativity, their brainstorming, and have them be part of the process for how we approach and improve carbon neutrality.
Across the company.
Yeah. We're in over 100 countries. Right now, I think we're at 109, 110 countries, subsidiaries in each of these countries. And then we have data centers in many of those countries as well, and 14 different business divisions. So we're able to drive that excitement. I mean, that's really the excitement. When people are accountable, they become engaged. When they become engaged, they get creative and they want to be part of the solution. So actually, this carbon fee suddenly made carbon reduction and carbon neutrality a solution that people wanted to engage with in ways they had never considered before.
So give us a clear definition of the carbon fee, then I'm going to go to a little bit of how that happened.
Okay. The Microsoft, what we've done is we charge a carbon price associated with the energy consumption of our data centers, our software development labs, and our office buildings, and then also as well for the consumption of business air travel, so basically airline fuel, jet fuel. And then we charge that. The important point here is cascading existing chargeback systems. So in going into an organization, what's important is you take a look at the financial structure and say, how does corporate finance charge all of these business divisions around the world? And simply put in and tap into those chargeback systems a new line item now that says carbon neutral. And that's where we calculate, we take our emissions and we calculate that by the price that depends on the actual source of the emissions. And then we drop those through the chargeback models. They show up on the line items of each of the business divisions. The business divisions on a quarterly basis pay that fee. It comes into a carbon fee bucket. And then we use that bucket of funds to invest in the projects I mentioned before, internal carbon reduction projects, which are energy efficiency, renewable energy, travel reduction programs, then purchasing renewable energy, and also as well investing in carbon offset projects around the world.
Now, I've got one question about that. The idea of all the money's coming into one place, it's not each division gets its money back. Like if my division pays $100,000 in a carbon fee in that quarter, I don't get that back for my division, but I get to propose to you something I want to do in my division.
Yes.
So now I'm in competition with the other divisions to
get more efficient and buy green energy and do all the things we want them to do. And so in a way, it instills the right behavior in itself.
Right.
So that's really, that's exciting.
Now, you're dealing with the CFO has to like this for it to get traction, correct?
Yes.
And so how did you even get to the CFO of this giant company where you weren't hanging out with them, I assume? Like you guys weren't pals or playing
No.
golf and things like
No.
that. So you had to work your way through this system,
Yeah.
earn your way through this system. And what was the story you were telling? Because we want to talk about story.
Yeah.
What was the story?
Well, what's critical about the story are two things. One is the language that one uses. For instance, in traveling, you've been to China.
Mm-mm. Sorry.
No, that's fine. You've been to Italy.
I haven't. We tried.
Where have you? Let me rephrase this, Peter.
I've been to Kentucky.
Okay, you've been to Kentucky. Tell me a place that
Wales,
you've traveled.
England,
Yeah.
France.
France.
There
Let's
you
take
go.
France.
There you
Do you
go.
know French?
Input.
So, in being in France, when you didn't know the local language, how was that experience? Were you somewhat limited?
Very.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in trying to speak the language or trying to speak French, I know that when I go to a place, and especially in being in Italy in the first few times, I start to use my hands a lot. I speak English to the Italians or the French. I shout louder in English, you know. I use the same words, And so what happened, what I did for the CFO, is to start speaking his language. And that's the key element of putting a price on carbon, is suddenly I wasn't speaking French I wasn't
You
speaking
weren't speaking hippie.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
were speaking business.
And then once I had the language right, then it was leading with the business case.
Okay, so what were some of those key words you were using, the phrases and the things? What are the details there?
These key phrases are very relevant to a business. They can also be tweaked a bit for any organization. So it was mitigating risk. That brings in the drama. That's the antagonist.
Right.
So we've got to mitigate the risk, and the risk that we're mitigating is primarily margin, because we can get more efficient, so we've got to mitigate risk
And you
and
know
margin.
cost of energy is just going up.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we've got to, what measure can we help control the consumption of energy and cost to help margins? And the other is mitigating the risk to revenue.
Okay.
That was another component. And brand is an important component
Talk about
there.
brand, because that feels soft and it doesn't feel like, where does this fit into brand? Or we can get into that more
Well,
later.
it's really important, because the CFO lives in a world of hard cost-benefit analyses. And what was important also about using the language and putting a price on carbon is suddenly we had entry into the cost-benefit analysis on both the benefit and the cost side. So we were able to start to speak those finite terms to get into the models that this organization lives by.
Right.
And the brand, having a soft value is not bad. It's a good thing to put on top of the financial analysis, because it's understood that there is value there. And that is a very important element that the sustainability team can bring.
Some of the things that I've been seeing in just my travels are when a CEO really pushes the employees to reduce the energy use or reduce the materials use, that they get turned on. They actually get charged by it, and they actually show up to work more, they call in sick less, and there's this great cascading events that happen out of that. Are you seeing that sort of thing?
Absolutely.
Give me some of that.
Well, the pride that's happening with the individuals coming to work, or I can use some examples of communicating out to some of the financial folks, is for each of these business divisions we'd have to talk about, not have to, but the other beauty about speaking the right language is you can educate. And suddenly there's accountability, there's education, because people need to learn what they're accountable for. And so the finance folks would come in on a business group by business group basis or business division, and I'd have these discussions. Well, they're busy on a million different things. They've got their financial cycle, and they've got this and this deadline, and they've been working all weekend. When I would sit them down, it would take 15 minutes to describe what this model is, the importance certainly to the organization and to the company and to the world, and to our customers and to the world. And within 100% of the time, they'd walk out of that meeting smiling, light, saying, I am so proud to know that this organization is committing to this, and I am so happy about it. And, oh, by the way, this will really help me as a tool to reduce costs. And that makes everybody happier. It makes them feel more productive. It's enabling success.
At a Fortune 50 company, you're finding that kind of feel-good situation for putting a price on carbon.
Yes. And
That's the theory, right? That's what we all think would make sense, and now it's making sense. It's happening.
And the creativity that's happening now, too. We have, for instance, and I was talking to one of our online service divisions leads, and suddenly he's saying, well, you know, now that we have this price on carbon, we're including it in our long-term planning. So the price of a server over time, et cetera, is much higher than it would be certainly without incorporating this into his model.
Yeah.
And so suddenly we're starting to get in longer term. Talking to another business division lead that said, hey, this carbon price is good, but you know, this is great, but now that I understand what's going on, it doesn't seem like this is quite enough. What more can I do? And there are now with the governance council, these business divisions and representatives from the business divisions, we get together every month, and now that they are accountable, they're engaged, the brainstorm and the creativity that happens on a regular basis has never happened before.
Well, you just talked about basically life cycle assessment of a piece of equipment, a data center, a server. And it seems to me that's been a missing link, is the person who buys the gear being in charge of the energy use of that gear for the life cycle of that piece of equipment. And that's why folks aren't buying the more energy efficient thing, because it costs more up front and there's this hurdle to get over.
Right.
Yeah, that's going to cost me more this quarter, but over 8 years it's going to save the company enormous amounts of money.
Right.
So that's a hurdle that your pool of money is helping people jump over?
Yes, so what we've done is we're accepting grants for the use of these funds, and we get proposals in, and what we do is help different business divisions for their particular project get over the hurdle rates. So if they need to invest in a more efficient piece of equipment, and they, you know, it accelerates. It accelerates the energy efficiency. So if we can apply those funds, it makes a difference.
So now people in Microsoft are writing grants for money from Microsoft to buy more efficient stuff.
Yeah. And what's really special
And
about
who's saying yes?
Yeah. Well,
Who's the chief of that?
it's the CFO.
Oh, so it's not you?
Well, he needs
Does
a
he ask
recommendation.
opinions?
Yes, he does.
Nice.
Yes, and Rob Bernard is part of the whole process to
Right.
take a look and say, these projects are carbon reduction, these do make sense, and so the team really takes a look at them and then
So
sends
now this
recommendations.
little small sustainability department at Microsoft is now a place of funding. And is it going to get like some serious money? Are we talking more and more serious money?
We're
or?
evolving over time.
Yeah.
Really, the first part of this, we're in just 9 months now that we've started this. We wanted
Hold on, 9 months.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's brand new.
Yeah. Well, we wanted to
brand new.
share the whole process.
Yeah.
Really, we didn't want to wait until it was 2 or 3 years old and then come back, but really share the growing process and the excitement and the enthusiasm. So it is entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
And we're evolving that over time. We really want to get the infrastructure built, or let's say the plumbing, which is integrating into the financial structure. How do you go through and bill and make sure this works and get the money in, and then establish how you get the money out? And then as we do that, then we are working through blending that price on carbon so that we can have a finite price on carbon, and then we can evolve that over time.
So like a single metric,
Yeah.
which isn't there yet. So when someone says to you, how much do you pay for a ton of carbon? That's not a simple, straightforward answer yet.
Not yet.
But you're working towards that.
That's the goal.
That's
Yeah,
the goal.
that's the goal. And then having that price and then increasing it over time. Because we certainly didn't want to shock the system, especially when it's new and vulnerable and fragile. We needed to really get solid plumbing so that it could withstand movement and creativity. It's an interesting balance because we want to be creative, but we can't get too creative when the infrastructure isn't quite solid enough.
Right.
So we're learning as we go there. But again, in talking to some of the real estate folks, they have never seen the type of collaboration across the company, across 100 different countries, saying, gee, you know, let's look at energy efficiency. What are some of the things we can do that and sharing that kind of information?
So you're achieving the thing that so many sustainability officers hope to achieve within their companies. You're getting it in the DNA of the company.
Yes.
It's getting in every
Yeah.
department.
With a very simple model, and it's repeatable.
And there was a moment where you had a discovery that, I'm going to use the word carbon tax again, she's not, but people think of tax as bad and punitive. I've done something wrong, you're going to tax me.
Right.
And you had a moment where all of a sudden you realized it's not a punitive thing, it's a beneficial thing.
Yeah.
Can you talk to that?
Well, there are two different ways to look at things. It's either can be punitive or accountability can seem punitive. And yet when you would turn it around and say, accountability means engagement. Accountability means innovation and change. Also, moving from a fee, from being punitive to supportive that's where we have the funds available to give back to a business division and say, yes, go ahead and accelerate this project. Move ahead, let's do it now rather than waiting. And that type of support, the business divisions just light up. And then the engagement even gets bigger and more creative, and there's more involvement in the process.
Which is the theory that I keep hearing, and there it is in place, happening. Yeah. Now, Disney had an internal carbon tax from about 2010. Did you study that? Do you know anything about that? Was there any conversation between Disney and Microsoft?
The Disney folks actually have reached out, and I just had a conversation with them just a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
And so I think that what we're going to do moving forward is start to share ideas on how to build the infrastructure. What is keeping it simple, which is really key, is how to keep it simple, and where we can help expand. Right now, Microsoft is charging a price on carbon across its emissions across all the scopes, which is technical term, scope 1, 2, and 3. And how can we help our other colleagues in different companies understand how you can do that across many scopes, and they can help share their ideas that they've learned from their examples as well.
Now you said there's 14 business divisions at Microsoft?
Yeah.
Are you guys doing this in all 14?
Absolutely.
So someone decided, let's just really do this. Like, for example, they could have just said, let's just try it on the travel and see how that goes.
Right. Or the data centers.
Or the data centers and see how that goes. So how did that happen to where you got full buy-in and we're all jumping off into the pool together?
Well, I think it's a matter of really taking a look at the whole situation, and that was the philosophy behind carbon neutrality. We could have come forward and said, well, we're going to try to reduce X percent. We maybe, let's go carbon neutral. We could try with a smaller portion of our operations. Nope, we're going across the board. We still have room also to grow, and employee commuting. That's an area. What's fundamental there is we need to get measuring the emissions before we can broaden on what else we can charge. And that's part of the evolution. But really it was a matter of, if we're going to do this, we really need to make this commitment, and we need to follow through with it, because that's the point.
So Microsoft, how many employees does Microsoft have?
90-some thousand.
90-some thousand, 110 or so countries.
Yeah.
And do you know, is its net income reportable, like the money that Microsoft?
Yeah, I think we're about 77 billion.
Annually.
Yeah.
So that's big. That's bigger than a lot of countries. And so with all and I say that in a good way, I personally feel that we can't fix this big problem of climate change without major corporations. And here is a major corporation leading the way, which is why I asked you to be the first person in this series. And I then all of a sudden think, well, if companies can do it that size that are bigger than some countries, how does this help our country on a federal level in federal departments and things like that?
Right.
And so have you had experience with anyone from the government coming to you, talking with you? Are they catching the scent of this beautiful thing happening, or?
Well, it's an exciting model, and it's productive. It's making a difference. And so the way Microsoft looks at our focus is how we are managing our own internal operations. And that's really our focus, to set an example and do this with a simple, repeatable model so that it can be used with different organizations. And the answer to your question is yes. We are having discussions with different representatives across the government to say, how can they be more efficient in their internal operations? How can they lead by example? And that's really even from local governments that we're working with, all the way up through, if it's city, regional, state, and then up to national level.
So in 9 months, you're already having those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think Microsoft is a healthier company because of this?
Absolutely, without a doubt. We want to improve. This is giving us really the mechanism to be able to get together, engage, and brainstorm on how to do that.
And because that's what I was saying last night when we met, if it's not helping your company be a better company, it shouldn't be done.
That's right, and it wouldn't be taking off if
Right.
it wasn't. And that's part of try things. It's having that mind of the explorer, charting your way and realizing, okay, I need to be aware of all the variables that are happening. Take a step, try things out.
Yeah. Is there interest in opening this up for Q&A? Have folks got some questions? Yeah, we have some questions. All right, so why don't we sort of set that up? And one of the things that I was talking to a fellow at Facebook, and Facebook at one point just decided we need to redesign from scratch all of our servers and database infrastructure because we feel it's so wasteful what we're getting.
Yeah.
And so, although the lights in all the plastic boxes around all their servers were beautiful, when they took them off, they saved 21% of their energy immediately. Just the boxes that did nothing other than look cool when you look down a row of 50 of them. So they're doing something that's called open compute. So it's with a lot of companies, and so they're open sourcing all the stuff they're doing so anyone can take that information. Are you guys looking at a formal open sourcing of this information?
Yeah, well, and especially around data center efficiency, because our data center team has some great energy experts, and they're driving innovation in this area, not only how to be more efficient with that envelope, take the envelope off, and be able to have self-contained elements that use minimal water. We're working with the UN in Nairobi and have installed an IT pack there that has been very efficient in its minimal use of water and minimal use of energy. And then as well, taking those sorts of concepts and being able to cycle in renewable energy and using power from methane to be able to power the data center, and really bringing those on site to actually transition to what's called data plants, so that they are self-generated energy plants that are dispersing data.
Are you guys using fuel cells at all? Or have you looked into that?
Doing some pilot programs with fuel cells, absolutely, and that's actually, we'd be using the methane to power the fuel cells. So that would be a strong link in the data plant.
So you guys have a goal of having your data centers become self-powering?
Yes, through data plants and renaming them data plants.
Data plants?
Yes.
And then that's pretty exciting.
It's
Those are
very
big.
exciting.
That's not just like throw a solar panel on a hot water heater.
Yeah. Very, very innovative techniques being investigated and piloted now.
And are you right in there? Are you able to just go to anybody in that link and just ask them any question you want and learn?
Well, it's pretty exciting, you know, especially to realize what their pilots are and what their projects are. And again, this is part of the governance council that we have now, our carbon neutrality, is that now that we have a corporate-wide policy around carbon neutrality, when we get together for these meetings, it is information sharing. So the data center energy team can show up and let all of the business divisions, because it's not just the sustainability team, but all of the business divisions now are better understanding of the innovation and the renewable sources of energy that we are consuming and building and piloting for our data centers.
Now, are you guys writing code to manage this whole game?
Yes.
So are you going to have potentially a product, a software product? It's like the carbon fee product for any company to use to guide them?
Well, we haven't really walked down that road. Again, we're just at the beginning now. We're testing it out.
Might make a little money. I don't know.
Well, it's really so simple, and
Right.
it doesn't need a
Doesn't need
program.
that.
It doesn't need that. That's really the important point.
Got it.
Is it's pretty simple when you use existing models to cascade.
Which is part of your game.
Yes.
Like, don't try to reinvent anything.
Yeah.
Just hop on board to what's being used.
Yeah, you need to track your emissions and then establish that price. We establish the price based on the use of the funds, and then enter that into the financial structure.
Now, have you guys looked at if a price on carbon becomes like a law, that will your internal game plan still work?
Yes, we will, excuse the pun, we will sustain that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and keep that going because it has so many benefits operationally.
Well, it seems like it would almost put you ahead of the game. So it seems like you guys are becoming stronger because you're sort of ready for whatever comes down the pike.
Absolutely. We're already training the operations to how to approach this and how to deal with this, and also how to support the end game, which is renewable, is efficiency, is renewable energy.
And where I would go next, and she already told me that I can't talk about it, is does Microsoft support a national carbon tax? And she has no answer for that, but I asked the question. Just want you guys to know I asked the question. I'm going to ask her right now. I'm not going to ask her right now. So let's go for some Q&A. Is there a mic floating around? Awesome. This gentleman right here.
That's no gentleman, that's Mick Dalrymple.
Don't mistake me for a gentleman. Just a quick question: as people borrow money against this fund, or as you grant money out of the fund, and they reduce their carbon, is their carbon tax then lower next year, next quarter?
As long, and as well, they have savings from, let's say, not paying as much to the utility. So in energy savings, or if it's travel, their T&E costs go down, their energy costs go down.
T&E?
Thank you.
Travel.
Travel and entertainment,
Got
as
it.
their travel costs go down. They keep their savings, and then as well, their carbon fee goes down as well. That's part of the benefit in that cost-benefit analysis for the finance.
One of our graduate students, Kevin.
All right.
Thanks, this was really interesting.
Okay.
Appreciate you coming here. So to channel my inner conservative, when Microsoft adds this tax, then Google or Apple is going to jump on, or nationally, if the US does something, then China is going to undercut them. It's going to actually hurt the company. How do you get over, did somebody bring that up when you were trying to push this through? Did you have an answer for that?
Well, that's actually what we hope to have happen. It's really a goal that, because it's a simple, repeatable model, that other organizations will take it on as well, because that's what the planet needs. And so the more other companies are doing this, the better. And if Microsoft does it by itself, we won't solve the problem.
But you're
From
saying
a
that
cost perspective,
The other way, would taxing carbon make you, sorry. I think.
no, go for it. Go for it.
Thanks. Yeah, from the other, I mean, it would be awesome if everybody adopted it, but just that, you know, if you've added this cost, would it make you less competitive? You know, that's
I
always
see.
the argument on a national
Right.
level. I was wondering about the argument on a corporate level.
So you're saying,
yeah,
does the implementation of this internal carbon fee make Microsoft less competitive
because of the cost model.
because of the cost?
Right.
And you're saying,
It's actually quite the opposite. Really what's happening now is we're seeing from our customers requests for proposals that want to know how are we demonstrating environmental responsibility. And so this is enabling us to increase revenue. So really the point would be, and I know we have to get down to the margins, but it's outweighed by the benefits we have in driving efficiencies. So we reduce costs from an efficiency perspective a lot greater than the cost assumed by the fee to drive that. And also as we move through and renewable energy, the pricing on that and the cost of that goes down, I think that what we'll see is overall, when you look at total operational costs, that there will be a balance there. And that's part of, excuse my reference back to the wind, but that's watching the wind. It's how do, and what's simple about the model is we have you've got to find these key points that you can change and twist to adjust. So if it's that price of carbon and you put most of your variability in that price of carbon, you can work with the price of carbon. You don't have to tear down the structure, you don't have to change the structure, you simply move that one variable, and that is able for you to manage the cost of carbon neutrality.
you mean
or
increase
not.
or decrease?
Yes,
the-
by that
the
one
fee?
by that one knob, that one throttle.
Mm-hmm. And find your sweet spot
Yeah,
for the company at this
exactly.
point in time.
Yes.
I've got a question for the audience. I wish I'd asked it earlier. When you walked into this room, before you walked into this room, students, how many of you thought you would want to work for Microsoft? Okay, now how many of you want to work for Microsoft? There you go. That's how you get good employees doing cool stuff. And my theory is that this generation and anyone coming up behind you is really going to want to work for companies that are going to be doing
Yeah,
this stuff.
it's important.
Is that accurate? I've seen a lot of
And to
heads
have
nod.
an
Yeah.
executive group that supports this is pretty amazing. I've learned a lot about our own executives through this process
Yeah.
and how excited they are about it.
Well, it's like I was telling you, energy companies get a lot of bad press a lot of times, and I was saying to you last night, I've never met anyone who worked at an energy company who wasn't a person. And when you get down to it being a person,
Yeah.
people feel better doing this stuff.
Yep.
They just do. And what is that? If that's just a natural reaction, then there's got to be something to it, right?
Well, and it's being proud. It's being proud as a dad.
Yeah.
You know, our CFO can go home now and talk to his kids that come home and say, Dad, what about this? We
What
got.
we're doing.
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
say, hey, this is what we've got going. So,
Yeah. Call me the tax man.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thanks. I've got a couple of questions. One is I'd like you to address, it seems to me that this type of a program should give Microsoft some advantage from the aspect of resiliency. We're looking at potential brownouts.
Yep.
Our energy consumption is focused on hydrocarbons, and I think that all indications are the current systems are not going to be able to keep up.
Right.
And so if you're building some I don't know if redundancy is the right word, but if you're providing enough diversity and other channels, I would hope that would improve your resiliency. And the other question, I'd like you to address that. The other thing is, you've got, you said Microsoft is third?
The
Yes.
number 3 purchaser
US
of
for renewable energy.
purchases in the
Yeah,
US.
so who's 1, 2, 4, 5?
Yeah, we're all
And
shuffling around
and
there.
how
But we
did-
got Intel and Kohl's. That's so funny. I kind of focus forward. Intel is number 1 and Kohl's is number 2 right now.
Coal?
I mean, yeah.
Like not
And
Walmart,
how
but Kohl's.
how are they
Yeah.
and how are they doing it that's different than what?
Well, they're purchasing renewable energy, but they don't have their internal carbon fee.
Yeah,
Right.
they find their funds in different ways. Our renewable, actually, you know, it's interesting because number 2 was before the carbon fee, and that actually was the interesting first stage, was to get the engagement and the support for that set of purchases for renewable energy. And then it was, we need to drive accountability down to the business divisions that are consuming this energy. So that actually was the first step. When the CFO, basically at a corporate level, ended up funding the set of purchases for that first number 2 slot, then it was, please, I don't want you to be covering this. We need to drive the accountability so we can get the innovation and the engagement into the business divisions. And that's basically the birth of the carbon fee.
But to his first point then, resiliency.
No, resiliency, that is a very, very important point, and thank you for bringing it up, because the energy strategy, and I'll take it's our offices, facilities, and our data center folks, is definitely resiliency. It's also secure. Security is really important. And I think what's happening now with this carbon fee is that it builds up the renewable, the green, the clean pillar within that strategy. So it is diversification, it's having on-site fuel cells, et cetera, that is really critical to resiliency and security for the data centers. You know.
Yeah, because you're in 110 countries, so
Yeah.
not every grid is as strong as our fragile grid.
Right.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Awesome. Oh, no, he's got the, where are we going? Okay.
You mentioned that one of the scopes that you're thinking about working on is the downstream consumer use of energy.
Yeah.
Have you started working on that yet?
Well, right now it's been through how can we develop software that is more efficient in the use in the hardware. So whether it's power management, that was actually in Windows 7. So definitely by the coding, we're driving efficiency out of the hardware use, definitely. And you know, even upstream with our supply chain, how can we, like Walmart sets a really good example with their supply chain. We're starting here with Microsoft in our operations and getting our own house in order is really what we're doing here. How can we then facilitate that downstream energy efficiency and energy reduction, I suppose, but efficiency for our customers, but also then how can we work upstream is the term with our supply chain in order to start expecting those same types of behaviors and responsibility there too.
How are we doing on time, Lauren?
Very good.
We good? Oh, sweet. Excellent. Excellent. Okay, and yeah.
So my question was sort of related to the political question as well as engagement. So given that your approach is a stakeholder approach, it's all the stakeholders involved in Microsoft taking ownership of this and responsibility for this, and it's the right approach, and I really like it. But Microsoft, as a public corporation, ultimately answers to its shareholders, not its stakeholders. And so, have you had any backlash from shareholders? And Freudian slip. And I assume probably not, but that's probably because of the transparency that you've taken from stage 1.
Yes.
Am I correct?
Mm-hmm. And that's where, and it's an interesting lesson in stakeholder analysis, is who are all of the stakeholders, how often do you communicate with them? It's the approach to gaining buy-in across a wide set of stakeholders. And so the board of directors is aware of this. If anything, the shareholders are really very positive and are asking more from Microsoft, and that's been very helpful. It's the customers asking for more, and it's the shareholders asking for more.
Excellent. And
Yeah.
so to expand on that and the political perspective, and that was, so with profit as the return on investment, profit is the primary motive of a public corporation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that's a measurement comprehensive enough to create benefit within an organization?
Absolutely, yes.
Because of a carbon
Yeah.
fee structure?
It helps. You know, it helps mitigate risk against margins, or reducing margins, and it helps reduce against declining revenue. And those are all terms, certainly, that the shareholders understand when they want a profitable business. And that's where getting the right language and speaking French with the price rather than a metric ton, and then putting that business case forward by using the right words. Now that you've got the language down, you use the right words in driving it forward, presenting a solution.
So you don't believe policy change is necessary in order for companies to become more beneficial? It's just more language and obviously internal recognition of
You're
your
saying national policy?
sort of internalizing your externalized costs and realizing
Yeah.
that you'll make more profit out of doing so.
Absolutely. I mean, that is the point, and thank you for bringing that beautiful phrase up, is internalizing the external costs of greenhouse gas pollution. That's exactly what we're doing to be more aware of the total cost of our operations. And not only is that very responsible, it also can lead by example, and we're taking that action. We have an internal policy, and we have that internal policy is carbon neutrality, and that's, in technical terms, that's a command and control policy. And then we have the carbon fee, which in technical terms is an incentive-based policy. And so that's the framework that's set up. We're not waiting for any type of national, what action can we take now? And so hopefully that will be an example, and it can represent hope for us in taking action.
But don't
Thank
you
you.
think Microsoft feels better about making these decisions because they weren't told they had to? Like you guys
Yeah,
are choosing
It's
to
very
do
interesting.
this.
There's certainly an entrepreneurial element to it that is engaging the group, and there is something about being part of something new that is very helpful.
I've got a friend in Kentucky who's the most libertarian of libertarians that I know. And he and I talk a lot about politics, and his thing about federal regulations and laws is, he to his mind, the best one, although he doesn't want any, but if you had to have some, would be that give incentive to do things, but don't mandate the doing of things. Yep.
Hi, thank you so much for coming over here. This is great. I have a couple questions. One is, what's next? What are you looking forward to do, moving this this feat forward? And another one is, what about your suppliers? How are you engaging them? Is this something that you're going to pass on to tier 1, 2, 3? How do you not mandate them to do it, but incentivize them to do it?
Right. Those two questions go hand in hand. As we evolve, and again, the first few months has been getting the infrastructure set, getting the plumbing in place so all of this moves well, the water actually runs from one end to the other, and it doesn't cause any problems, and then people get used to it, they get very comfortable with it, and then the creativity really starts to go. And that is not only, once we get the pipe, the infrastructure and the plumbing in place, then we can go to the use of funds. And that's where the creativity, we can really be focused on the creativity there. As part of that, right now, Microsoft is working with our tier 1, 80% of our spend in particular categories, to request that our suppliers track emissions. So again, this is all step by step. Is first you've got to track the emissions before you can measure the emissions to be able to start to reduce the emissions. And then how you reduce the emissions can happen in a variety of different ways. So we're starting to engage our supply chain, looking at our colleagues in different corporations as fine examples to see how we might be able to engage more.
The stepping stone basically to have like this holistic, entire capturing costs.
It's the,
Repeat his question.
so let me make sure that I heard that correctly as well, is it the vision to encapsulate all of the carbon, whether it's from our own internal operations, our suppliers, and our customers? I think that in demonstrating responsibility, we're starting with our internal, keeping our internal house in order. I think that that's a natural progression as the education and the awareness across the company deepens for what we're doing and why. Even at the beginning now, there were a lot of very basic conversations that had to go on about metric tons of carbon and how is that associated, and renewable, how do you buy renewable energy and how is it in the mix? So the beauty of this is that it is educational, that people are listening, that corporate vice presidents are saying, thank you, I've learned something new today. This is really exciting. I love that we're doing this. So that's going to happen step by step. So yes, and in the roadmap over the years, that's definitely the plan for us. Yeah.
Before we get to you, sir.
Yeah.
We know you're the #3 purchaser of renewable energy in the United States right now.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a percentage of Microsoft's energy in the U.S. is, like what percentage of your energy in the U.S. is renewable?
Within the U.S., well, given this purchase, we're 100% renewable.
100% renewable?
Yeah. Using the renewable energy credits to offset our energy consumption in places like Kentucky, you know, in the offices in Kentucky. So gross, we're at about 25%. When you look at net, gross is just the emissions that you generate consuming energy off the grid. When we purchase this incremental renewable energy through different mechanisms, then that nets it out to zero.
For the U.S. operations?
Yes.
So you guys are carbon neutral for the United States?
We're actually carbon neutral right now globally.
Globally?
Yeah, for data centers, software development labs, our offices, and our air travel.
Very cool.
We've processed through 2 quarters now and invested in the energy efficiency projects. That reduction won't show up. Most likely, we're anticipating that won't be for another 9 to 12 months, the efficiency, depending on the project, will end up showing up in reduced emissions. But we've invested there and then as well in purchasing renewable energy and then the carbon offsets to net out the operations.
Now, when you have a place like in Kenya you were talking about where you're getting the methane, you're running the turbine, that's an offset, right?
That's a carbon offset. Yeah.
How long till that becomes just business as normal and it's not countable as an offset anymore?
Yeah, and there are certain periods of time. Yeah, and these are what's nice about the carbon offset. And there's associations that have set standards and criteria where they rate or certify certain offset projects, and that's part of the additionality or what's taken into consideration for how long is a project valid in offsetting. Taking this example, Microsoft's carbon, and so they have a timeline that they're set, and they vary by project. So this one in particular, I think it's 3 years. For them. And basically it's really for them just to get the foundation for their business so that they don't go away without that funding. So it's getting them to financial stability so that they can keep going.
And then the theory is that they keep going and then you guys find another one that you can use for 3 years.
Yeah.
So that's huge.
Yeah.
That's really huge. Yeah. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad it's not like, well, it's 100 years we're going to use that credit. Yeah.
Well, and the projects are so exciting to see what people are thinking of in different parts of the world. And it really aligns with the Kyoto Protocol on how developed countries, let alone a corporation in a developed country, which is really exciting, can support developing countries and emerging growth areas and help them innovate more quickly.
I think we need a new term, developed corporations and developing corporations.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, excuse me for being the skeptic in the room, but
we love you.
Whenever large corporations come in and start telling me all the wonderful things they're doing for the environment, I tend not to believe it. So are there any publicly available sources? You say you're carbon neutral. Are there any publicly available sources that will show this, that will show that you're better than Intel and Kohl's or the other major corporations? Is there anybody tracking the actual amount of carbon emissions that Microsoft is producing around the globe, you know, in all its offices and all its travel and all its production and all its transportation and so on?
That's a very good question, and I'm happy to say that yes, we do, and we're third-party verified, and we publicly report through the Carbon Disclosure Project, which is an organization that has I think there's about 8,000 businesses now that report publicly through the Carbon Disclosure Project, and that information is used by institutional investors to evaluate responsible, sustainable organizations and other corporations so that we can see what each other's doing. And so we have all of our emissions verified as part of that process, and then as well we're having this whole carbon fee third-party verified as well once we get through our first financial cycle.
And are those third-party verifications, are those transparent? Do you have those posted online?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you guys...
And part of the Carbon Disclosure Project. And it's cdproject.net.
Didn't they just change their name?
They
Does anyone know that CDP?
Yeah,
It's just CDP.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
okay.
they went to their acronym,
Okay, yeah,
kind
yeah.
of as a branding
Yeah.
perspective.
And they rate companies, they check everybody out.
They're pretty tough. Yeah, and their survey to complete is a year-long process, and the level of detail of the questions gets more intense, significantly more intense every single year, and the point structure that they use to evaluate. But in transparency-wise, we did get a 99% in transparency for our disclosure of our emissions. Yeah,
And
I forgot to mention that.
there's data that I'm getting from a banker friend, actually in Seattle, who's pulling data from Bloomberg and other sources, where when a company just is transparent about the energy they use, they're seeing a rise in their stock value. And when a company then starts to lower those energy and resources, is what I meant to say in the first part, then they're seeing additional value in the stock market. And the money they are loaned, their financing rates get lower in the same way. So there's actually market reflection right now.
Yeah.
Because people, I guess, assume if a company is going to be transparent about their energy use and the materials use, they're a stand-up company.
Right.
Therefore, they're more trustworthy.
Yeah, and this is, to your question, it's still a nascent area, and I've seen a big change in accountability, and the CDP is certainly part of that, and also the verifiers of these offset projects has been exponentially improving over time. And I think that as we see more organizations, and the good news about having corporations come in is at least corporations come in with their money. And if they can help move markets that will help other folks, then it's a good thing. You know, as long as it's all honest and transparent and verified is the argument back on that.
Question.
Put them to use.
In terms of getting buy-in at the executive level, what were some of the last hurdles? Did you need to change planning horizons? And then also, what were some of the, to use, I think it's Peter's term, the unanticipated benefits? You talk about some of the learning.
Okay, well, in answer to your first is keeping it simple. Literally, the CFO said, okay, TJ, this is great, it's fabulous, I love the idea. Your last hurdle is I want that plumbing, I want that infrastructure to be simple. And so it was not to have new planning cycles per se. It was, or new chargeback models, but it was entering, really scuba diving into the financial structure of chargeback models and going in there and saying, okay, this works to that, because how can I maximize accountability and simplicity at the same time? I have to make it simple. Now, how can I maximize reaching every single business division around the world? And so that was the final hurdle. We didn't sleep for probably, I don't know, 4 months. And then when we did, it was very strange dreams.
And to get to that carbon neutral commitment, how thoroughly did you need to cost out or have certainty around how much are we going to make
that was
from
a
this?
lot more sleepless
How much
nights.
is it going to cost of this?
Yeah.
I mean, did you have to get sort of 75% of the way there, including the carbon pricing piece with the energy efficiency and the renewables?
Right.
That would have a predictable payback period, and then there's a little bit unknown, or do you, how far did you have to go on that?
So a few different approaches to combine. First of all, the principle is to be very conservative at the end with projections, I wanted to, if anything, come out net negative, meaning, we are way carbon neutral. We're contributing, we're negative. And in order to do that, I took historical, because we had tracked emissions for several years, so I took historical data, and I also talked to the business divisions and said, what are your projected increases, which we had established that pattern over time, but I really pushed on them, because this time it really matters. And I took that, and then, of course, you have the extra layer of, see, there's so much complexity in this anyway, that if you have a complex model, it crashes. So, because there's enough complexity in the world, let alone smart people get involved, and then, oh my good Lord. But then there's the energy pricing. When we talk about we're going to go out and purchase renewable energy, what is the price of that over time, and how can we maintain carbon neutrality? And so the idea is to have a forward view and projections that are reasonable in a market that is clearly unreasonable and things can shift. So it's the wind watcher. You got to be out there watching, feeling every little movement to understand how that impacts your model. And really, in order to get back to simplicity, because I don't want to confuse you, it all comes back down to that carbon price. So.
And you had one extra thing where you were saying the unintended benefits.
Oh yeah, unintended benefits. It's miraculous, really, to get people together that are now engaged and interested. It is limitless what people can come up with. When you get passion with engagement and interest, driven by accountability, it's remarkable. For instance, so the long-term planning was a start, but to have people come together and say, we want to think about new ways we can drive efficiency, and seeing these people passionate about changing behavior of their business division, of their subsidiary, and the projects that are coming forward, it's the passion and the excitement and the ripple effect. We couldn't have anticipated how positive this would be.
Can you be specific about any of those projects that are coming forward?
Well, yeah, and they range, I was going to say, because they are the traditional change your lighting, fix the blowers. They're also from even simple to, we want to go out of bottled water. We want to develop a bike system. So the way people are thinking is brilliant especially in our subsidiaries and where they're coming forward. Even our data center team, how can we go ahead and we build infrastructure differently? How can we engage renewable energy in a new way? How can we fuel our fuel cells with renewable energy? These types of conversations weren't happening before we implemented this.
I think we have one more question, and the gentleman in this front table has the mic.
Yes.
Yeah, I like your analogies. I'm a sailor and pilot too. So, but you're basically still using auxiliary power. You're trading off your energy units, and oil can be used for medicine. It can be used for plastics and lots of other things. We don't have to burn it for energy. We can be sailing with the wind.
Yes.
So when do you see yourself turning around to being all energy and not burning it?
Yep. I think that to give you, from a bigger picture perspective, that's the direction we're heading, because we understand that's what we're going to really need to be doing. And in the future, that's going to be, frankly, from a business perspective, that's going to be the cost-effective approach. Because depending on finite resources, the clear indication of the future, and when we bring the cost of that future, even the cost of climate change impacts, but just the cost of a finite resource, clearly is going to increase over time. So when we look even from a financial perspective, renewable energy, even with the demand, may increase the price, but that's the direction we have to go to maintain profitability. So it is step by step over time, and the good news, and part of the unexpected benefits are the amount of people that Microsoft is now hiring in order to take a look at these issues, exactly that. And so that now basically the energy team on the data center is tripled in the last 9 months since we've started these discussions. So then again, it's getting those smart people in that room to brainstorm and to make progress faster and accelerate that. So that's definitely the direction that we're heading.
And then just sort of talking about the wind, I've got a friend who's at Ernst & Young, and in their sustainability division, they used to have like 3 people, and he's just hired 40.
Wow.
And so that's a multiplier because they're then consulting all the companies.
Right.
And so that's the wind, right?
That's the wind.
Okay, so we're going to tie it up.
That's right.
When TJ and I were first trying to get to each other on the phone, she had to push back the phone call a few times because she had a loss. She had lost her mom. So I want to understand what your parents gave you that brings you to here right now.
Yeah. Wow.
And you just tie it all up in a nice, neat bow.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, my mother passed away on January 24th. And what my family brought to me was a sense of accountability. I was always held responsible for the consequences of my behavior. And so that's probably been part of it. The other is, another rule was to leave any place or person better off than before I arrived. And so there's definitely that.
Place or person?
Place or person.
Ah,
yeah, place
or person. I've heard the place. I didn't hear
the person
before.
The place or person. And gratefulness as well. Gratefulness for our world. We would, as a family, and I was able to go with my mom and dad alone, big gap in sibling thing, I was a surprise. And so I was able to spend time with them alone on our vacations each year. And we would spend a lot of time at the ocean and ended up in the San Juan Islands, which is where I ended up with Microsoft. The incredible time we had together in nature and the respect for that. And they, even just growing up, my mom let me go surfing, and she encouraged it, and it was engaging with the earth. So thank you for that.
Yeah, parents, I'm here because of my parents. You all have the answer to your question. Are you here? Did your parents help get you here?
Yeah.
I'm so glad you got you here. And Lauren, thank you so much for making this happen. You really did.
Yeah.
I just asked Lauren, hey, do you want to do this? She's like, sure. And I don't know how many approvals you then had to get. I don't know that stuff yet. Not many. That's good. Bottom up.
Well, we all have to go start taking this kind of action now too. Drive this
And
forward.
you were asking me what happens after this event, right? So if you can inspire anyone towards action in their company, yay. If you can inspire the students to start demanding these things in the jobs they get going down the pike, yay. If you can stay in touch, that'd be great. If you could help ASU do the same thing that you're doing, I'm not speaking for anyone, I'm just suggesting that might be an interesting idea. All those things. And then we're going to meet some students later on today too. So.
Okay. If there's one point to leave you all with is take the action. Don't wait for action, but be the action. Just go be it.
Just
and
start.
it's amazing what magic happens. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you.